Hi, this is the video for Wednesday, March the 3rd, our Organization and Ideas Day. I'm going to talk us through some models of outlines, and that will be our BGD today. So with the end in mind, you can take a look there at the BGD. You're going to set a timer for 7 minutes, and you're going to write an outline of a timed write, rather than writing the paragraph at the beginning, or rather than writing the timed write itself. We will have a timed write next Wednesday. So this is kind of our last full practice of how to outline for that experience. Before we do that, the instruction today is on narration. So I'll talk us through some ideas about narrator, narrative distance, and try to get you thinking in that direction because your prompt is about narrative distance. So let's get into the lesson here. Day 3, day 1 was structure, day 2 was structure, and day 3 here is narration. I'm going to start by asking your classmates to do this warm-up activity, and I'd recommend you do it as well. It'll really help you with your outline. So it's 5 minutes. You can press pause here, go do this little activity, and then come back and feel a lot more ready for everything else. I just say to your classmates as they come in, focus on one of our many narrators that you've encountered so far. You've encountered everybody one time. Find a quote in that section that reveals something about distance. Chronological, physical, or emotional distance. And then your time to write question, you can draw on this idea, but it's getting you thinking about the way that we are separated, either from each other, from a place, or from time itself. We're not close to it anymore. And then I'll ask your classmates, what did you come up with? What are the quotes that have to do with distance of some kind? That will inspire our study of narration, which is going to be the topic for the timed write. So here we go, our standards today. We're going to start with 7b, develop a thesis statement that may establish a line of reasoning. So we're really interested in that line of reasoning. How are you going to carry out logically this argument? How are you going to plan it? And that's the outline. Today we're going to write a timed outline in 7 minutes. In that outline, I'd like you to write your thesis statement and then 2 to 3 topics for your paragraphs in the middle. If you have time, you can generate topic sentences, as much detail as you like, or even add an option for your conclusion. Where will your conclusion go? The topic is narration. So our standards there, identify and describe the narrator and speaker of a text, and then identify and explain the function of that narration, of that point of view in a narrative. So just taking a second to appreciate, as always, in AP Lit, like these seem simple. Identify the narrator. Okay, like here they are. But of course, it's always going to be that simple task done exceptionally well. Describe the narrator. What is their purpose? What is their distance? What is their impact? So let's get into it with the Joy Luck Club. A lot of this is review, and I'm going to go through it with your classmates. We'll open up the glossary. I challenge you to see if you can name these answers without checking anything in the glossary. You'll probably be very encouraged as to what is in your mind about narration. There's lots of parts to narration. We want to be able to identify all of the pieces with a lot of fidelity and automaticity. So who is the narrator? Well, in the Joy Luck Club, there are 8, and they're really clear. It's these 8 women, these 4 daughters and their mothers. And the narration goes between those different groups. So by the end of this section that you've read, you've heard from everybody one time. And then, of course, in the second section, as you might anticipate, you're going to hear from everybody one more time. By the end of the book, you'll have 2 vignettes from each character. In what perspective is the novel written? First, second, or third? Take a second to think about it. It's first person. Even though there are lots of narrators, so we kind of think, oh, it must be omniscient narrator. I can see, okay, it's third person, right? It's first person. Every time the person is writing, they're writing with personal pronouns. I, me, my. What is the scope of the narration? It is omniscient because we can see inside of everybody's minds. But it's also kind of limited because when we are in a chapter, we can only see inside of one character's mind. So, like most great novels, it's a blend. It defies an easy explanation, but it's good to be able to know it's the terms for that, limited and omniscient. What is the narrative tense? This is mostly set in the present with flashbacks. So present, past tense. And then what techniques are being used? There's a lot of really stylistic work here. There is no real stream of consciousness that's significant to note, but there's a lot of narrative technique in the way that it goes back and forth. There are narrative techniques in the little excerpts that begin some of the stories that are told in this third person limited perspective. Those are often like folk tales that begin at the top of the sections. This glossary will take you to all the other terms that are good for you to know, and you should be encouraged, again, just like the day with structure, that you know a lot of this stuff. It's all part of your upbringing and your English education so far. Here we go. So point of view perspective, either first, second, or third, omniscient or limited, narrative tense, present, past, or future, and then narrative technique. That's just more stylistic choices. It includes stream of consciousness, notably, as one of its biggest sort of examples. All right. So we've identified, but we want to describe. The basic identification is barely enough to get you started. So you want to move immediately into this, describe the narrator, identify the function of that narration. So how do you do that? Well, one way to do it is to think about distance. So to what degree is the narrator distant from their subject? A lot of it is through these choices, these ideas about first person, etc. But we can capture the meaning by thinking about physical, chronological, relationship-based, or emotional distance. Are they there wherever there is? Or are they physically distant from this place? Did these events happen a long time ago? In this book, yeah, usually. Are they talking about someone close to them? Or is it somebody really far away? And in this case, it's both, right? It's their mothers or their daughters, but there's distance there. And then emotional investment. How tied are they to this experience, whatever it is? And they're deeply invested. Almost always in this book, the characters have a deep emotional commitment to the subject. Now, how that's revealed, how much that's hidden from the character, those are all really interesting topics to consider. So if you go back to your warm-up writing about distance, what did you write about? Now, what of these, or is it outside of these, did you find yourself interested in? That might be something you can write about today. Did you take up something that had to do with the physical distance of these women from China? The home that's woven through so many of these stories? Did you take up chronological distance? The way that they're not quite in the same place in time, and they're usually writing about something that happened quite a long time ago. Some of the stories are about when they were 3, young kids. So why are they doing that? Did you write about that? Did you find yourself writing about distance in relationships, the way that there is a distance between characters? Or did you find yourself writing about the distance that one character has from the subject, whatever the subject might be? Where did you naturally go? Consider going there now. We are going to move into our timed outline rather, and reminder here. In the outline, I'd like you to write your thesis statement and then 2 to 3 topics for your analysis paragraphs. I've told you it's about narrative distance. I'm going to keep saying that. I will reveal the prompt soon, but I want to make sure you understand what this outline can look like. So first of all, outlines. What good are they? You know, a lot of us don't even do them anymore. I'm making us do it today because there's a lot of value to at least seeing how your mind works. Feel free to handwrite. Outlines are potentially more effective if done in a handwritten way. Certainly on the AP test, that will be something you'd want to do. So think about doing it now. You would get out a fresh piece of paper and you jot down all of your thoughts on that piece of paper. And then at the end, you take an image and then upload that image or copy paste that image into your BGD. That'd be fine for me if you want. Here's some reasons you might like to do that. If you choose a bubble outline, it's just a lot easier to handwrite this than to do what I did, which is have to go find like the shapes and stuff. But maybe you do this. Maybe this is the way your mind works. Maybe you think about your main concept and you draw a web of different ideas that come off of it. I love to do this when I'm unfamiliar with the prompt, unfamiliar with the text. You might do a prose outline that's really just paragraphs. And in this case, half the essay is already written by the time you begin writing it. Or you might do a list thesis that's a little bit more truncated. You're just trying to jot down your ideas and you've got an order, but you have to flesh them out as you write the essay. So let's get into the content here of the outline so you can see kind of what I find to be really helpful. I'm modeling these off last week's timed write about Icarus. So if you remember, the prompt was, how does Field use literary techniques to set the story of Icarus in a modern day setting? My thesis is immediately upon reading this idea here. The concept I've gotten is he doesn't learn. That's the message for me. What are the lit terms? Irony, repetition. I have some others here. Imagery, symbols. I end up discarding those and not using them to reveal that he doesn't learn. And I know in my conclusion, I want to get into the idea of there's no growth here for Icarus. He never learns humility, which is the point of the lesson. In my bubbles, as I try to figure out what to say, I start by noticing there is a lot of irony here. Nothing's what it seems. There are these neat front yards, these gray suits, but everything is hidden. The curtains are carefully drawn. It's interesting to me. I had this idea about imagery, like these images, but I can't quite figure out how to tie them to the thesis immediately. So I'm going to end up discarding that idea. I have another idea about symbols. The feathers are representing something. The ceiling fan represents the sun somehow. I can't quite make that work. Although it probably can work, I can't figure out how for my brain to make it work with this idea of no growth for Icarus. I'm going to discard that idea too. And then this idea, I love this idea about repetition. The repetition of words, hero, heroically, hero, it's like 3 times in the second to last stanza. Actions, every night he flies to the ceiling fan, every night, like that's crazy. And then the repetition of this ego that he can't quite let go of. I'm fascinated by this last idea here. And so, as I build my outline, I know everything is going to build to this concept. Save the best for last. So I'm going to start with irony, which is good, but it's not as good as my repetition idea. That's going to be my second point, and I'll build to this last concept about a repetition of his own ego to get into my conclusion. That is the problem. He never learns. He keeps dedicating his life to his own glory and achievement, and he'll never, in that way, grow. I can achieve the same thing with a prose outline, but the benefit of the bubble outline is it gives you a little flexibility in choosing your order, discarding things you don't like. The prose outline, the list outline feels more committed. It's harder to back yourself out of it and say, oh, actually, that should go second. So the bubble outline allows you to just be open-minded about it. But if you feel like you know what you're going to do, then you might choose the prose outline. The prose outline is where I just start writing out full sentences, like I'm basically generating my essay, or the list outline where I know what I want to do, but I'm not going to use such full descriptions. I'm just going to quickly jot them down. I'm going to go quickly back to show you some of the benefits of the prose outline. Like I said, the sentences are more fleshed out. So I can get into this idea by the bottom of my second paragraph where I write the full sentence, but he does not learn. I can actually see myself using that sentence in the essay. And because of that, my conclusion is like really coming together, and I haven't even started. I know I'm going to talk about the repetition of the experience itself. There is no growth. Growth is when you stop repeating something. He cannot learn the problem in the first place is his attempt to fly with no other purpose other than flying. His dad was flying to escape the island, but Icarus is flying just because he loves the idea of himself flying. It's ego-driven. He cannot learn the trap of pride and righteousness over the fuller life experience of humility. I can make that my last sentence. Like in a prose outline, it unfolds really fully by the end of it. The outline can do the same thing, but you'll just have to flesh out the ideas. Here, I get to that same concept in my conclusion. I say the repetition of the experience itself. There is no humility/growth. So I know where I'm going. And that is the benefit of the outline in general. Just know where you're going. Save your best ideas for last. Here is your work. Pause, read the prompt, and write.